The class of 2022 heading off for freshman year. There's new controversy, or is it old controversy, about college admissions. The Trump administration is reversing Obama-era academic affirmative action policies, which encouraged schools to favor minority applicants. Opponents call it reverse racism, and the Education and Justice Departments have now jointly reissued Bush 43-era guidelines encouraging race-neutral admission policy. Education Secretary Betsy DeVos says the Supreme Court has determined what affirmative action policies are constitutional, and the court's written decisions are the best guide for navigating this complex issue. Are they? Let's bring in Rahul, an attorney who specializes in immigration law, civil rights, and criminal defense and family law. Welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Our president is upending lots of his predecessors' work. How much of this is just politics?
Well, look, I mean, I think the American people have had enough of the social engineering that has sort of plagued this country for the last 10, 15 years. And I think, it used to be, a white versus black thing. I think that the Asian community now has thrown their weight into this, and so it sort of tilted it in the opposite direction and made it more complicated. Obviously, the Harvard case is a prime example of that, where the Asian American community felt that they were being discriminated against in their admissions policies. So this is part and parcel of something that's happening wherein the Asian American community is now moving this country in the direction of, disavowing race as the primary factor and reaffirming that quotas are unacceptable in a competitive university setting. This is America. It's supposed to be the land of the free, home of the brave, and the survival of the fittest in the sense of a capitalist society. But the social engineering has, in the opinion of most Americans, I think, at this point, has really gone the way of the dodo, and it's sort of, run its course. And I think it's time to get back on track to being competitive and moving forward and, awarding admissions based on merit rather than quota systems.
The Justice Department has filed what's called a statement of interest in a suit that is going to go to trial in October, which you just referenced. Defendant is Harvard, plaintiff Students for Fair Admissions, alleging that Harvard does intentionally discriminate against Asian Americans by limiting their admissions. Now, why would Harvard do that? How could this not be racial discrimination?
That's exactly correct. They're playing a very fine game, and their lies are being exposed in the sense that, we don't consider race as the primary issue. But I think they're concerned. I mean, that also brings into play the issue of the legacies. In the sense that there are certain people that are more equal than others, and they generally tend to be, white Americans who are legacies, quote unquote, and parents, grandparents have gone to the same university for generations, and then so their progeny sort of get, bumped right to the front, even if they're not the brightest sometimes or not the most motivated, and that's also unfair. But they tend to be it's a de facto de jure analysis. They tend to be mainly white. The ones who are beneficiaries of the legacy movement. But in terms of the Asian American community, I think what the concern seems to be is that they are tending to be, industrious in the immigrant mentality, and they're achieving great feats academically, and they're quite understandably outraged that they seem to have to work 2, 3, 4 times harder to get in to a university. And they feel that's very unfair. And that there's a microcosm of that happening in the New York City schools as well, where Mayor de Blasio is talking about that, and the Asian American community is not very happy about that. In terms of keeping them out of the prep schools, for example, because, for whatever reason.
Yeah, that caricature of them being smarter than us just reeks of resentment, doesn't it?
Well, it's not about smarter or less smarter. It's about industriousness, I guess, in the sense. It's just results. I mean, really, it's just about results. The results are there, and they feel that they're being held back. It's a very, very thorny, dicey issue. It's ridden with controversy. But I think many feel that affirmative action has, played its part for many generations. And that's now time to get to brass tacks. And I think it's time to get back to competitiveness and honesty in the admissions process, which should, where race should be one, maybe could be one factor out of many, but not the most compelling factor or gearing a university towards placing an emphasis on race in terms of a quota, which has been ruled unconstitutional consistently by the Supreme Court. That race-based quotas are absolutely unconstitutional. However, race can be a factor out of many factors if there's a compelling interest.
Now, back to the legacies whom you mentioned a while ago. These could be the children, the grandchildren, even for some of the ivy-covered walls, even the great-grandchildren of alumni. They often get favored consideration. Cornell University President Martha Pollack says legacy admissions help perpetuate, quote, a Cornell family that goes on for generations. If you graduated Notre Dame, the University of Virginia, or Georgetown, your kids have a roughly 2-to-1 advantage. At Princeton, legacies are accepted 4 times the general admission rate. At Harvard, 5 times. Now, as the USA becomes more diverse, this will be less a factor for future generations. But for now, legacy preference does work against the student body diversity. Has this surfaced in any legal actions?
Well, that's a great question. Nobody's really touched that. And that also shows a little bit of the hypocrisy as well that's going on here. Nobody's really discussed the legacy issue. They tend to see it as a marginal issue, that legacy students are only a small percentage of the student body. And the vast majority of it is based on other factors. But it is true that legacies are, by and large, white Americans, just because of the generational issue. There was not a lot of, non-white students going to the universities a couple generations ago. Non-white immigration, non-white admission to universities is a relatively new phenomenon for the last 40, 50, maybe 30, 40, 50 years. So. That's 1 or 2 generations away. So legacies by virtue, by nature, are inherently biased because they just are. But it is interesting to see the Asian American community teaming up with the white community on this very issue, because now the Asian American community is being denied equal access to the universities, even if their scores are off the charts, even if they've shown to be very meritorious. So they're understandably very angry about this. And the Trump administration has thrown their weight behind this.
Trump administration is so interested in this. Is it the obvious, playing to their base?
No, I actually think it's ironic. This kind of shows Trump as a man who embraces competition. He embraces excellence. He embraces hard work ethic. This is definitely not a race issue. So all those people who claim that Trump is he's racist or a race bait or whatever the case may be, this is just right in their face. He's actually getting behind the Asian American community on this issue, because he's showing that this is not about race. This is about raw, natural talent to make America great again. And the bottom line is, if that means that the racial results will not be to everyone's liking, well, so be it. It's all about the excellence, the grades, the hard work, the results, and the product. And that's really what he's all about. And that's sort of the New York spirit in him. And I think that's the CEO in him. He just wants to find the right people for the job. He doesn't really care about race or ethnicity. He just cares that you're competent and you're good at what you do and you work hard. And I think that's a tribute to his administration.
Thank you, Attorney Rahul Manchanda, joining us from RT Studios in New York.
Thank you, sir.